The resort manager's voice on the other end of the line was crisp and professional. "Yes, Mr. Evans, the cancellation is confirmed. The entire reservation for the Henderson party, including the presidential suite, the spa packages, and the private yacht charter for tomorrow has been voided." I could hear faint, panicked chatter in the background through the phone. My mother-in-law, Helen, her voice escalating into a screech. I pictured them all standing there in the marble lobby of the Four Seasons Maui, their designer luggage pooled around their feet, faces contorting from smug satisfaction to pure, unadulterated fury. They had called me poor, one too many times, never suspecting that the very ground of luxury they stood on was paid for by me. You might be asking yourself why I would orchestrate such an elaborate and expensive act of revenge. To understand that, you need to understand the invisible debt they forced me to accumulate over 5 years of relentless humiliation. It all started the day I met my wife, Sarah. She was a light in my life, kind and gentle, a first-grade teacher who saw the good in everyone. I was a librarian, a quiet man who found comfort in the order and silence of books. I lived a simple life, not because I had to, but because I chose to. My parents had left me a trust fund, a significant one, managed by a discreet financial firm. They taught me the value of character over currency, and so I never touched it, never spoke of it. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. When Sarah and I fell in love, I thought I had found that. Then, I met her family. Her father, Robert, was a mid-level manager at a regional insurance firm who acted like a Wall Street titan. Her mother, Helen, judged everyone by the brand of their handbag. And then there was Mark, the golden child. Mark, Sarah's older brother, was a junior analyst at some soulless investment bank. He was loud, arrogant, and draped himself in brand names from head to toe. The first time they met me, their smiles were thin and cold. Robert gave my hand a limp shake, his eyes scanning my simple, off-the-rack suit. "A librarian," he'd said, the words dripping with disdain. "How noble." Mark just laughed. "So you basically shush people for a living?" "Bet the pay is killer." They saw me as a stain on their pristine family portrait, a financial and social dead end for their precious Sarah. They had no idea who I really was. And for 5 years, I let them believe their own fantasy. For 5 years, I became their favorite project, the improvement of Sarah's charity case. Family dinners were the worst. They were less about connection and more about public performance. Mark would boast about his latest bonus or a killer stock tip, and my father-in-law would beam with pride. "That's my boy, a real shark." Then all eyes would turn to me. "And how's the library, Liam?" Robert would ask, a smirk playing on his lips. "Managed to alphabetize the D section yet?" The table would erupt in polite, cruel laughter. My wife, Sarah, would squeeze my hand under the table, her silent apology a constant companion to their abuse. She loved me, but she was a product of their world, conditioned to never make a scene, to swallow discomfort for the sake of a fragile peace. Her silence was a different kind of wound. The holidays were a masterclass in their casual cruelty. One Christmas, I spent weeks searching for the perfect gift for Robert. A first-edition copy of his favorite author's novel. I was proud of it. It was thoughtful, personal. He unwrapped it, glanced at the cover, and set it aside with a flat, "Oh, an old book. Thanks." Moments later, Mark presented him and Helen with keys to a brand-new Lexus for their anniversary. The room exploded in cheers and tears. Helen hugged Mark so tightly, I thought she might break his ribs. She looked over his shoulder at me and mouthed the word, "See?" The message was clear. My love was worthless because it didn't come with a hefty price tag. They weren't just dismissive. They were actively trying to grind me down, to prove to Sarah she'd made a terrible mistake. They wanted her to see me through their eyes, small, poor, and insignificant. They would constantly offer me unsolicited, condescending advice. You know, Liam, Mark once said, leaning back with a cigar he probably couldn't afford. You could probably leverage the library's database to do some side hustle data entry, make a little extra cash. Helen could show you how to make a budget. Helen nodded eagerly, as if teaching a grown man how to manage his non-existent income was a noble act of charity. They spoke of money as the sole measure of a man's worth, and in their ledger, I was bankrupt. I just sat there, nodded, and absorbed it all, letting their arrogance build. Every insult, every smirk, every piece of patronizing advice was another drop of fuel. I wasn't getting angry, I was getting patient. I was building a case in my mind, and the verdict was getting closer with every passing day. My patience was a deep, quiet ocean, but even oceans have a breaking point. The final straw came on my 5th wedding anniversary. I had booked a table at a cozy Italian restaurant that Sarah and I loved, a place with checkered tablecloths and candlelight. It was supposed to be our night. We were halfway through our meal, laughing about a memory from our honeymoon, when the shadow fell over our table. It was Helen, Robert, and Mark, dressed to the nines. "Fancy seeing you here," Helen chirped, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We were just celebrating. Your father got the big promotion." Of course he did. They pulled up chairs without asking, completely hijacking our evening. Robert, puffed up with self-importance, launched into a monologue about his new regional director title. Mark then took the stage. "And to celebrate Dad's success, and frankly my own killer year," he announced loudly, ensuring the nearby tables could hear, "I'm taking the family to Hawaii for 10 days. First-class flights, presidential suite, the works. A proper celebration for a family that knows how to win." He looked directly at me, a glint of malice in his eyes. "Don't you worry your little head about it, Liam. It's all taken care of. You and Sarah just have to show up. We wouldn't want you to have to sell a dozen of your precious first editions to afford the airport taxi." Robert chuckled. "Consider it an educational trip for you, son. A chance to see how the other half lives." The humiliation was thick and suffocating. It wasn't just an insult, it was a public declaration of my worthlessness. They were framing their luxury as a gift, but it was really a weapon designed to make me feel small, to indebt me to their generosity. I looked at Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She opened her mouth, a weak protest forming on her lips. "Dad, that's not—" But Helen cut her off. "Oh, hush, sweetie. Don't be so sensitive. We're family. We take care of our own, even the less fortunate ones." That was it. That was the moment the ocean receded, revealing the sharp, jagged rocks beneath. They had finally handed me the perfect weapon. In their supreme arrogance, they had laid out the exact blueprint for their own downfall. I went home that night, a cold, clear purpose solidifying in my mind. They wanted to give me a handout? No. I was going to give them the world. And then, I was going to be the one to take it all back. The very next morning, I made a call to my financial advisor. The phone call the next morning was short and precise. My family's wealth manager, Mr. Albright, had handled my trust since I was a child. He was an older gentleman, discreet to a fault, who operated with the quiet efficiency of a Swiss watch. "Mr. Albright," I said, my voice steady, "I need to make a significant withdrawal. I require $150,000 in a temporary account, accessible immediately." There was a brief pause on the other end, not of concern, but of process. "Of course, Liam. Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone professional. He knew I hadn't touched the principal in over a decade. "Everything is finally becoming all right," I replied. "Also, I have a rather unusual task for you and your concierge team." I laid out the plan, every detail meticulously considered. I told him about the 4 seasons in Maui, the first-class flights, and the presidential suite my brother-in-law had bragged about. Then I told him to top it. I don't want the presidential suite. I want the one above it. The top floor, the best view. I want a private car service from the airport, not a taxi. The yacht Mark mentioned? Find a bigger one. Pre-stock the suite with their favorite champagne, the expensive kind Helen always orders and pretends to know about. I want this to be the single greatest vacation they could ever conceive of. Mr. Albright simply noted the details. And under whose name shall we book this, Liam? He asked. Book it under my father-in-law's name, Robert Henderson, I instructed. But here is the most important part. It must be completely anonymous. When the resort confirms the details with him, they are to state that the entire package has been prepaid by an anonymous benefactor as part of a VIP appreciation award. Make it sound like something he's earned through his own importance. The trap was set. I knew Mark's ego. He would brag for weeks before actually getting around to booking anything. My team moved faster. 2 days later, at Sunday dinner, Mark was fuming. Can you believe it? He spat. Some high roller already booked the presidential suite at the Four Seasons for the whole month. I tried to pull some strings, but it's locked up tight. Helen looked devastated. Robert's celebratory mood soured. I suggested innocently, well, why don't you call them directly, Robert? Maybe a new regional director has more pull than a junior analyst. His chest puffed out again. He loved the idea. He excused himself to make the call. His voice from the other room shifted from demanding to confused to utterly ecstatic. He walked back into the dining room, his phone in his hand, his face glowing. You are not going to believe this, he stammered. They've given us an even better suite. The entire trip, flights, food, everything. It's all been comped. A VIP award for my years of service. They said I'm one of their most valued clients. Mark's jaw dropped, but he quickly recovered. See, I told you. My contacts must have pulled it off and upgraded us. They celebrated their incredible luck, their own perceived importance. They had no idea they were celebrating a cage I had built just for them. The weeks leading up to the trip were a masterclass in smugness. My in-laws were unbearable. Robert started calling himself a man of international standing. Helen spent a fortune on new resort wear, holding up dresses for my approval, and asking, Now, do you think this says effortlessly wealthy, or just fabulously wealthy? Every conversation was a performance. They would discuss the minute details of the trip in front of me, as if I were a child being taken to Disneyland for the first time. They have 7 different pools, Liam, Helen would say slowly, as if I might not understand the concept. And don't you worry about tipping. Robert and I will handle all of that. We know you're not used to that sort of thing. Mark was the worst. He had fully absorbed the narrative that his connections had secured the upgrade. He would clap me on the back and say things like, See, Liam? Stick with me, and you'll go places. Maybe this trip will inspire you to, do something with your life. He even gave me a $100 bill one afternoon. Here, he said, stuffing it into my shirt pocket. For souvenirs. Don't spend it all in one place. The condescension was so thick I could taste it. I just smiled my quiet, unassuming smile and tucked the bill away. Sarah, bless her heart, was caught up in the fantasy. She saw this as a turning point. Isn't this wonderful? She'd say to me at night. I think they're finally starting to see you for who you are. They're making an effort. She was so relieved, so happy, that the family conflict might be over, that she couldn't see the truth. She saw their behavior as an awkward, clumsy attempt at inclusion. I saw it for what it was, the final, glorious inflation of a balloon I was about to pop. Her innocence made what I was about to do both harder and more necessary. She deserved a life free from their toxic influence, and it was clear she would never be free as long as she was under their thumb. The day of the trip, they arrived at our house to pick us up in a hired limo that Robert insisted was standard procedure. They were loud, ostentatious, and treated the driver like a personal servant. At the airport, they swept through the first-class check-in I had arranged, their noses in the air. As we sat in the plush lounge, sipping complimentary champagne, Helen looked at me with a pitying expression. "You must be in shock, Liam. It's a lot to take in, I know." I just nodded. "I am," I said truthfully. The entire flight, they talked over me, planned their excursions, and reveled in their own magnificence. When we landed in Maui and the private car I'd booked met us at the curb, Robert clapped the driver on the shoulder and said, "See? That's service." They were living a king's life, entirely on my dime, and their only emotion was an ever-expanding sense of entitlement. The higher they climbed, the further they would have to fall. The lobby of the Four Seasons was even more breathtaking than the pictures. Waterfalls cascaded into koi ponds, and the air smelled of plumeria and salt. My in-laws stood in the center of it all, gawking like peasants who had stumbled into a palace, which was ironically accurate. Their brief moment of awe quickly morphed back into arrogance. "Well, this is more like it," Robert declared, striding toward the polished check-in desk, as if he owned the place. "Robert Henderson," he announced to the smiling attendant. "Checking in. You should have the Royal Mail suite for me. It's a VIP award." I wasn't there, of course. I was thousands of miles away, sitting in the quiet, comfortable chair of my home office, a glass of water on my desk. My phone was on speaker. On the other end was the resort's general manager, a man I had been coordinating with for the last hour. My timing had to be perfect. I had tracked their flight, estimated their travel time from the airport. I waited until the precise moment I knew they would be standing at that desk, their egos inflated to maximum capacity. "Are they at the front desk now?" I asked calmly. "Yes, Mr. Evans," the manager replied. "They've just given their name." "Then please proceed," I said. "Cancel everything." Through the phone, I could hear the distant shift in tone. The manager was speaking into his own headset, relaying my command. I imagined the scene vividly. The attendant's professional smile would falter slightly. She would type, frown, and type again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson," her voice would say. "I'm showing that reservation. But it appears to have been canceled." Robert's boom would follow. "Canceled? That's ridiculous. Get your manager." Helen's voice would rise in a panicked whine. Mark would be fumbling with his phone, trying to find a confirmation email that never existed for him. The beautiful, serene lobby was now the stage for their private meltdown. The manager I was speaking to walked over to his desk to handle the situation personally. I could now hear their frantic voices more clearly through his phone. "What is the meaning of this?" Robert demanded. "This is a prepaid, all-expenses-paid trip." The manager's voice was smooth as silk, just as we had rehearsed. "Yes, sir, it was," he said. "However, the reservation, along with the flights, car service, and private yacht charter, was just canceled by the benefactor who paid for it." There was a stunned silence. Robert finally found his voice. "The benefactor? What are you talking about? My company paid for this." The manager paused, letting the moment hang in the air before delivering the final, devastating blow. "I'm afraid not, sir. Our records show the entire $150,000 package was a gift from a Mr. Liam Evans, and it was Mr. Evans himself who just called to cancel it." I listened to the dead air on my end of the phone, picturing the scene. The manager had delivered his lines perfectly. The name Liam Evans, connected to the sum of $150,000, would be like a nuclear bomb detonating in their tiny, materialistic world. Their brains simply wouldn't be able to compute it. Robert's face, I imagined, would be slack-jawed, cycling through confusion, denial, and finally sputtering rage. Helen would be clutching her pearls, her face a mask of horror, not because of the lost vacation, but because of the public humiliation. And Mark, the golden child, the shark, would feel the ground beneath his feet turn to quicksand. The person he'd mocked, the man he'd patronized with a $100 bill, held more financial power in his little finger than Mark had ever actually possessed. Their entire social standing, their very identities, were built on a lie, and I had just exposed it in the most spectacular way possible. It took less than 5 minutes for my phone to ring. The caller ID showed Sarah's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing myself. "Liam," I said calmly. Her voice was a frantic, hysterical mess on the other end. "Liam, what is happening? What did you do? My parents. Everyone is staring. The manager said a name. Your name." She was sobbing, barely coherent. "They're stranded, Liam. They have nowhere to go. He said you spent some crazy amount of money? It can't be true." I listened patiently until her frantic stream of words ran out of breath. When she finally paused, my voice was quiet, but carried the weight of 5 years of silence. "It's all true, Sarah," I said. There was no anger in my tone, only the cold, hard clarity of fact. "I paid for the entire thing, and then I canceled it." She started to cry again, a confused, wounded sound. "But why? How? You're a librarian." "Yes, I am," I said. "That's my job. It's what I do. It is not who I am, and it is not what I am worth. For 5 years, your family has treated my profession as a punchline. They've called me poor, treated me like a stray dog you brought home, and you stood by and watched them do it." The accusation hung in the air between us, sharp and undeniable. "They wanted to drag me on this trip to cement my status as their permanent charity case, so I decided to speak their language, the only language they have ever understood: money. I have a trust fund, Sarah, a substantial one. I never told you because I wanted you to love me for me, not for a bank account. Your family just proved they are incapable of that." I let that sink in before delivering the final, crucial point. They are not stranded. They are exactly where their cruelty and arrogance led them. They can afford a flight home. The question is, who are you coming home to? There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, filled only by the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. She was caught between 2 worlds, the one she was raised in, built on status and appearances, and the one she had built with me, built on what she thought was simple, quiet love. I had just revealed that both worlds were, in their own way, a lie. I didn't fill the silence for her. I had said everything that needed to be said. After a moment that felt like an eternity, I heard a soft click. She had hung up. The ball was in her court. I spent the next day in quiet solitude. I didn't check the news from Hawaii. I didn't need to. I could picture it perfectly. I saw Robert, his face purple with impotent rage, trying to haggle with an airline ticketing agent for last-minute flights. I saw Helen, her makeup ruined by tears of fury, trying to hide her face from the other travelers in the crowded economy cabin they would inevitably have to book. I saw Mark, stewing in silent jealousy, forced to use his actual credit card for the first time on this disastrous trip. The indignity of it all would be a far greater punishment than simply missing a vacation. It was a public and irreversible demotion from the elite status they had pretended to have. They were forced to live, for a few miserable hours, the life they had always accused me of leading. The messages started flooding in once they landed. They were exactly what I expected. A voicemail from Robert, bellowing threats. "You think you can humiliate me, you little worm? You have no idea who you're messing with. I'll ruin you. I'll see to it you never work in this town again." It was laughable. What was he going to do? Get me fired from the library? A string of texts from Helen, alternating between manipulative guilt and outright venom. "You deceived my daughter. You are a monster. How could you tear this family apart?" And from Mark, a single sputtering text filled with typos. "You're a pathetic liar, hiding your money like a coward. You got lucky. Watch your back." I read them all with a detached sense of finality. the way a doctor might review a patient's chart after the disease has run its course. Then, I blocked all 3 of their numbers. I was done. The only person I hadn't heard from was Sarah. For 2 days, there was nothing. I started to wonder if I had misjudged her, if the pull of her family's toxicity was stronger than the love we had shared. I began to accept that my act of liberation might have cost me everything I truly cared about. On the 3rd evening, my doorbell rang. My heart hammered in my chest. I walked to the door and opened it. There stood Sarah, alone, her suitcase on the pavement behind her. Her eyes were red-rimmed and tired, but they were clear. She looked at me, taking in my calm expression, and took a deep, shaky breath. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice quiet. I stepped aside, and she wheeled her small suitcase into the hall. For a moment, we just stood there in the entryway, the silence thick with unspoken words. She was the one who broke it. "They were horrible, Liam," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. "After I hung up with you, the things they said, about you, about me for choosing you, it was like a poison. I never realized I'd been drinking my whole life. Their anger wasn't just about the vacation. It was that you had something they didn't, and you didn't flaunt it. It offended their entire view of the world." She finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with a profound sadness and a new, steely resolve. "When we got home, all they could talk about was how to sue you, how to ruin you. They demanded I leave you, that I help them take what was rightfully theirs. They said you were a deceitful monster." She took a step closer to me. But the whole time they were screaming, all I could think was that the monster they were describing was the same man who reads to kids at the library, the same man who brings me soup when I'm sick, the same man who held my hand for 5 years while my family slowly tried to crush his spirit, and I let them. I was a coward, Liam. I'm so sorry. The apology was real, forged in the fire of the last 3 days. It was everything I had needed to hear. I pulled her into an embrace, and for the first time, it felt like we were a team, a fortress of 2 against the world they came from. About a month later, we were having a quiet Saturday morning when Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen, and her face hardened. It was her mother. I watched as she answered, putting the call on speaker. Helen's voice was a desperate, sycophantic whine. "Sarah, sweetie, thank God. We need your help. It's Mark. He's in so much trouble." It turned out Mark's killer year was a fantasy built on high-risk trades and borrowed money. He had lost everything, and his company was coming after him for the debt. They needed $50,000 to keep him from being prosecuted for fraud. "We'll pay you back, I swear," Helen sobbed. "Please, he's your brother." Sarah listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When her mother finished her panicked plea, Sarah's voice was ice. "For my entire life," she said, her tone cutting and precise, "you taught me that a person's value is measured in dollars and cents. You taught me that my husband was worthless because he chose passion over a paycheck. You mocked him, you humiliated him, and you begged him to change. Well, I've finally learned the lesson you were trying to teach me. And based on his character, his history, and his business sense, my brother is a terrible investment." She paused, letting the words land. "Do not call me again." Then she hung up the phone and blocked the number, just as I had. She looked at me, a small, true smile finally reaching her eyes. We were free.